distinguished guests and friends. I am truly delighted to be here with you this morning and to have this opportunity to address this distinguished audience of the NanoIsrael conference. The power of new technologies is everywhere. They change how we live and work, sometimes with amazing speed. Social media was practically unknown a decade ago, yet today 1 billion people use Facebook and interact with friends, family, and colleagues in entirely new ways that no one could have predicted. That's the thing about technology. Its impact is entirely unpredictable. Today, no one knows how the mobile internet, cloud computing, or advanced robotics will change our lives, or how modern gene sequencing technology, which is advancing even faster than microelectronics, even faster than polymer microelectronics, will affect the war on disease and global poverty. But one thing is certain: technologies create lasting change, and there's no going back. One field of research that holds tremendous promise for disruptive change is, of course, nanotechnology. Today, my life centers around research in nanotechnology. I, together with about 250 scientists and engineers in my company, live and breathe nanotechnology. And we have had some amazing results, which I will share with you today. Now, some of you may be asking yourselves, hey, isn't this guy the founder of Indigo, a digital printing company? What's his connection to nanotechnology? That's sort of a polite way of saying, what's he doing here anyhow? Well, I was asked by the organizers to not only answer that question, but to tell you my story, to share with you some of the lessons I have learned and some of the insights I have gained on my 40-year trek as a high-tech entrepreneur. But first, allow me to tell you a little bit about myself. In 1941, as the Nazis began rounding up Jews of Eastern Poland, my parents escaped from Poland to Russia, where my father was taken to a forced labor camp, while my mother reared their then only child, my brother, my older brother, in unspeakable wartime conditions. At the end of the war, reunited, they made their way out of Russia, through Poland, where I was born, and eventually to a refugee camp in Germany, where I spent the first 2 years of my life. Finally, my family emigrated to Canada. My father was a carpenter, my mother was a seamstress, and I grew up in a very poor but very loving home, a Zionist home. So as a young man growing up in Canada, I dreamt about two things: about machines and about Israel. I eventually moved to Israel, where I founded a high-tech company called Indigo, which now, 37 years later, is a division of Hewlett-Packard. Indigo is the market leader in commercial digital printing systems. When I started out, my goal was to fulfill the biblical prophecy, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah tatfusa digitali. For out of Zion shall come forth the gospel of digital printing. And now it's a reality. Israel is not only on the map, but at the forefront of the digital printing era. Printing is a huge industry, $800 billion in size, and it's old. For almost 600 years, it has remained fundamentally unchanged. Yet society and everything about it has changed. The world is now digital. Information is created and communicated at computer speeds. But printing has remained a mechanical process. You take a printing plate, smear it with ink, and press it onto paper. All it can do is duplicate the same image page after page. Indigo's vision was to marry the attributes of ink-based printing with a computer to electronically achieve the beauty, the brilliance, and the quality of offset printing. When Indigo unveiled its invention, digital offset color printing, it shook the entire printing industry to its foundations. Indigo became the market leader in the digital printing industry that it itself had created. Now, I'm sure that some of you are saying to yourselves, printing? What are you talking about? Why are you talking about printing? Haven't you heard of the iPad? Printing is dead. Talk to us about steam engines. Most people think of printing as books and newspapers, which indeed will certainly be replaced by digital media. But books and newspapers are only 10% of the printing market. The rest of it, the remaining $700 billion, is not only not dying, it is thriving. Take packaging, for example. Packaging is everything you buy in a supermarket or a drugstore, and it's all beautifully printed. Packaging alone is a $320 billion market, growing faster than the GDP of even the most rapidly growing economies. And packaging will never be replaced by digital media. You won't see cornflakes or digitally wrapped Bamba. So back to my story. What is the most important lesson I've learned from the Indigo chapter? Actually, it has nothing whatever to do with printing. When I started Indigo, we attempted to interest an American photocopier company called Savin Corporation to become our first client. After months of trying to convince Savin's then chairman, Mr. Paul Charlap, whom I had never met, to visit us in Israel, he finally showed up. And he loved it. He loved everything about it. He loved the technology, he loved the machines, he loved the people. So when he left, I was certain that I would hear from him within days. But days turned to weeks. Then finally he called and he said, Benny, I've booked you and your wife a suite at Claridge's in London. Can you join us for the weekend? Join us? Are you kidding? Spend a weekend with the Charlaps in London? So I brought my wife, and he brought his lawyer. There in London, he explained what Savin needed, a new generation of photocopiers, and he wanted us to develop them. Then and there, we negotiated the deal. A couple of weeks later, he called me and again said, Benny, contract's ready, come to New York, which of course I did promptly. I came to his office and found Paul with his lawyer. Here it is, he said, please read it, then sign. Here? Now, I said. Needless to say, I didn't have a lawyer of my own. I started to read it and turned white. Paul, this isn't what we had agreed. This is much more favorable for our side than the terms we negotiated. Yes, I know, he said. The trouble with you, Benny, is you don't know how to negotiate, and I have to do it for both of us. With that one statement, he won my heart and my loyalty for the rest of my life, and we became the dearest of friends until the day he died. So what is the lesson I learned from that? It is this: the best deal isn't the one that appears on the face of it to be the best deal, but rather the one that makes the other side feel that they got the best deal. This tenet has become the cornerstone of my values. Always ensure that the other side gets the best deal, whether the other side is a customer, a partner, a vendor, an employee, or I would add, a spouse. And if there's one ingredient for success, that may be it. But that's not the only factor in Indigo's success. There's another one. patents. When Indigo began, we did not set out to develop a digital printing press, but rather a faster photocopier. We believed that a copier based on liquid ink rather than powder toner could be faster, higher quality, and lower cost than the existing technology. After 6 years of research, we had a real breakthrough: electronic ink. But no sooner did we invent it than we had a revelation. Hey, if this magical ink could replace the toner in photocopiers, maybe it could also replace the ink in printing machines and enable offset printing to become digital. For the next 10 years, we worked on the development of the world's first digital offset color printing press. The entire time, Indigo remained a private company, no outside investors, no venture capitalists, no government loans, grants, or other public funding, and no products. So how did we finance over 16 years of R&D? Patents. Great patents. You see, in those early days, when we embarked upon the development of our high-speed copier, we knew that our ink technology could enable a copier to run at speeds well over 100 pages a minute, 5 times faster than then existing copiers. But in order to do so, we had to not only develop the core technology, the printing process, but also all the enabling technologies: high-speed sheet feeding, document feeding, and document scanning, which simply didn't exist back then. On these enabling technologies, we got great patents. Eventually, as the world's copier manufacturers learned to make faster and faster copiers, every one of them ended up stepping on our patents. Patents are a minefield. When you step on one, you pay a price. So ultimately, virtually every copier company in the world, Xerox, Kodak, Canon, Ricoh, Minolta, Mita, every copier company in the world became an Indigo licensee. In fact, if you have a copier in your office, it is likely that something in that product was made under license from Indigo. That brought in over $200 million in license fees, which funded 16 years of R&D. You see, patents are a great equalizer. Patents are the only legal monopoly. That simple piece of paper, the patent, can give even a backyard inventor from Sri Lanka or from Nestiona the power of an Apple or a Google. Now, to get good patents, you need good scientists. But to get great patents, do you need great scientists? Not at all. You simply need to be the very first to identify the problem. You need to be the pioneer at the cutting edge of his field, the first to tread on new ground. You see, patents are simply a solution to a problem. And if you're the very first to identify the problem, you have the best chance of being the first to identify a solution. And if it's a unique solution, well, unique solutions make great patents. So is that all it takes? Generosity of spirits and patents? No, there's another essential ingredient: persistence. Let me tell you about persistence. I mentioned that my parents were immigrants to Canada. After a few years of working as a carpenter, my father bought a tobacco shop. But magazines and tobacco barely paid the rent. When he bought the shop, it had a tiny photo studio at the back where the prior owner took passport photos. But my father didn't have the money to buy the photo studio with its expensive equipment. So instead, he built his own. Knowing little about photography, but a lot about carpentry, my father, who was quite an inventor in his own right, built an enormous wooden camera. Actually, it was an all-in-one photo booth, camera and darkroom. There was a front section that was like a phone booth, with a seat and a bank of fluorescent lights on one wall. Between two of the fluorescent lights, there was a lens. On the other side of the lens, he built a machine and a darkroom. The machine had a huge roll of paper and all sorts of bicycle sprockets and chains, rods, wheels, pulleys, and the like. He would pull one rod, then another rod, then some kind of guillotine cut the paper. On the other side of the lens was the darkroom. The most extraordinary thing about this camera is that it used a direct positive photographic process in which the image is captured directly on the final paper, avoiding the need for film. The paper prints would simply drop into a box in the darkroom, nesting in one another, ready to be developed. The huge advantage of this process is that it could produce passport photos on demand without needing to wait for an entire roll of film to first be developed. And then from the start to the finish, the whole thing just took minutes. Eventually, my father taught the entire family how to develop the passport photos. People would come in and sit in this photo booth. My father would take off the camera lens cap made of leather for about 2 seconds and say, 1, 2, 3, put it back on, pull each of the rods that would advance the paper, cut the paper, then move on to the next photo. In the meantime, one of us would go into the darkroom and start developing the prints. Amazingly, in about 10 minutes, customers would have their passport photos. When I was about 12 years old, one Saturday, I was developing some prints. A customer came in and said he needed about 100 photos for job applications. Normally, of course, all you would need is one negative from which you would print the 100 copies. But my father's process didn't use film. So needless to say, it took about 2 hours to take 100 photos. I developed each photo carefully, one after the other. We had this long counter at the back of the store where I laid all the photos out in sequence for them to dry. It was like a movie from start to finish. So at the beginning, you see this person sitting in the middle of the frame, smiling. And then every once in a while, you'd see this blur as his head would fall. By the end, the guy was slumped in a corner, the lower corner of the frame, looking like death. But it worked. All went well until one day the federal government of Canada changed the passport regulations requiring that the photos have a matte finish. My father's process used only glossy paper, so what did he do? He did what any persistent carpenter inventor would do. He soaked the photos in vinegar to soften the emulsion and then pressed them in a wood vise against rubberized fabric, which embossed the photos to create a matte finish. And that too worked. Later, the passport office again changed the regulations, this time requiring a white border around the picture. Now normally, you have a negative and a light box. You cover the edges with metal shims that mask the frame, and you simply print one photo after another, each coming out with a white frame. But my father didn't use film. He used direct photography, and there was no negative. Each photo was unique. So again, as an inventive carpenter, he persisted and found a solution. He took this huge sheet of plywood, cut out a rectangular window, painted the frame white, hung it with chains from the ceiling in front of the seat in the photo booth, and every time a customer would come in, he'd pull the frame aside, seat them, and they would sit in the middle of this frame, and he would take a picture of them together with a white frame. Amazingly, that worked too. I remember one day we received this letter from the Canadian Patent Office, and it said something like this: "Sir, I'm writing to you not in my official capacity in the passport office, but I am also an amateur photographer, and I have to ask you, how did you do the trick photography in which the customer's tie was out of the frame?" My father taught me not only persistence, he appreciated me. He had to mix the chemicals by hand, and it took him hours. So I built a mixer for him, using some rubber tubing, an electric motor, and an old phonograph. I mounted it on a 5-gallon jug, and lo and behold, it mixed the chemicals for him. He was so thrilled. He used to drag people in off the street, passersby, policemen, anyone, to show them my son's brilliant invention. To this day, I sense his pride in everything I do. So there we have it. Business generosity, patents, and persistence. So if that is the secret to Indigo's success, then how do you explain the phenomenal success of Israel's entire high-tech industry? Israel, a land with almost no natural resources, no mineral deposits, no oil. We don't even have water. But what we do have is one resource more valuable than them all, which is unique to Israel: Israelis. In our age of explosive technological advancement, a society's economic strength is determined not by its coal mines and steel mills, but by its technology. I believe that Israel has one of the most technologically creative and innovative communities in the entire world. I have for decades tried to understand why. Israelis certainly have their share of flair, creativity, and drive. But more than others? I don't really think so. And Israelis aren't exactly known for their modesty or humility, so that's not it. Perhaps it's their loyalty and commitment. They are, after all, true team players. But that too is not unique to Israel. So is it their personal ambition? Yes, it's high, but there are others who would score even higher. So what is it? Well, I have found that all these attributes are important: creativity, drive, loyalty, ambition. There's one that trumps them all: working for a higher purpose. You see, Israelis seem to be working for some undefined higher purpose. It's hard to explain. Perhaps it is related to the fact that every child grows up knowing that he will spend 3 years of his life serving his country, not for personal gain, not for profit, but for some unquestioned purpose higher than himself. In his workplace, the Israeli transposes that same sense of working for a higher purpose to his company. The result is amazingly powerful and is the true magic on which Indigo and Israel's high-tech industry was built. Indigo ships the most magnificent machines to the 4 corners of the globe. And on every single one of them it says, "Made in Israel." For me, my dream has come true. So, what does an entrepreneur who grew up poor but had great luck do after his dreams have come true? Well, in my case, he searches to give back to society, to share his luck with others, and to help them fulfill their dreams. How? Well, we do this in 3 ways. The first is a fund that my wife Patsy and I set up called the Landa Fund for Equal Opportunity Through Education, which invests in talented young Israelis. Young people who I call of privileged minds and underprivileged means, and enables them to pursue higher education. I said invest, not donate. I'm an industrialist, not a philanthropist. I don't donate, I invest. But how do you decide in what to invest? Well, just as investing in high-tech companies, it's not how badly the support is needed, but rather how great is the opportunity? How large will be the returns? When you invest in education for our youth, the returns aren't measured in shekels or euros, but believe me, this is the best investment in town. These students will be tomorrow's leaders of science and technology, of academia, and of business, leaders of our society. So the Landa Fund has thus far distributed over 200 million shekels, that's over $50 million, to make higher education available to youth from the periphery, new immigrants from Russia, Ethiopia, kids from poor homes, and Israeli Arab youth. For Israel must not only offer equal rights, but equal opportunity to all of its citizens, rich and poor, Jew and Arab. For only when that happens will all of Israel's citizens truly be an integral part of our society. And without that, what kind of a country would we have here anyhow? So, how else am I helping others to fulfill their dreams? The second way is through Landa Ventures, an investment fund that identifies promising technology startups and puts wind in their sails. You see, in my long career in high tech, there isn't a single mistake that I haven't made. So I try to help these young entrepreneurs avoid those mistakes and come up with their own. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that my entire life is dedicated to helping others fulfill their dreams. You see, I still have a few dreams of my own. And for that, I have Landa Labs, a research center employing about 70 of our country's top scientists, mostly physicists, chemists, and materials engineers. That's my sandbox. I've always had a lab. That's how Indigo began, as my lab. But this time, it's different. Firstly, I can't afford to take another 30 years to get there. Secondly, I now can afford to take huge risks and even to undertake the seemingly impossible. So, while I can't tell you exactly what we're working on, because it's very, very secret, well, if you promise not to tell anyone, it's nanotechnology for alternative energy. Oops, now I've done it. Secret's out. Well, please don't tell anyone. Okay, I trust you. At Landa Labs, we have developed amazing technology for creating nanoparticles. It all started about 10 years ago, when in order to develop a very special kind of thermoelectric converter, one that turns low temperature heat into useful electricity. I know it sounds pretentious, but we're actually trying to save the planet from global warming. We realized that we needed to create nanostructures, miniature buildings that are only a few nanometers in size. Trouble was, we couldn't find anyone who had this technology, couldn't find anyone who could make it for us, or even anyone who'd be willing to try. So we had to invent our own method. The result was a unique and powerful way of creating nanoparticles, which enables us to take existing compounds and turn them into nanoscale structures. One use for these was, of course, for our energy conversion project, which, by the way, now, after 11 years, we see signs of life, even though it'll probably take another 3 or 4 years before we have a product in the market. There are additional spin-offs to this technology, ranging from LCD displays and batteries to personal care products and drug delivery. More about those in a few moments. One of these spin-offs came from the discovery of Nano Pigments, which have optical properties so amazing that they enable an entirely new kind of printing process that we call nanography. Almost 2 years ago, at a huge printing show in Germany called Drupa, which is the Olympics of the printing industry, we unveiled a family of 7 nanographic printing presses, and the market went crazy. During the 2 weeks of the show, we took $1 billion in orders for digital printing machines that we couldn't even deliver for the next 2 or 3 years. Many are calling nanography the second digital printing revolution. We are ramping up our digital printing organization, which now has about 200 employees, to meet that demand, and expect to build new ink factories and printing press factories that will spew out more of these amazing machines. So you see, I live a privileged, charmed life. For a second time, my dreams are coming true. So some say to me, Benny, isn't it time to retire? And I answer them, by retire, you mean finally doing what I most love? Well, I've been retired my whole life. So back to the sandbox, Landa Labs and the nanotechnologies I mentioned. We focus on only one aspect of nanotechnology, nanomaterials, specifically nanoparticles. As you may be aware, in general, there are two ways of producing nanoparticles, bottoms up and tops down. Bottoms up means the creation of nanoparticles by self-assembly of atoms. Though we employ this method for creating simple structures, such as metal colloids, plasmons, carbon nanotubes, or buckyballs, for now the technology of self-assembly simply isn't advanced enough to enable the creation of complex molecules, such as pigments or drugs. Therefore, for the foreseeable future, the tops-down method seems to hold the most promise. The tops-down method is primitive. You take a bulk material, say a lump of coal, and hit it repeatedly with a hammer. With each blow, the particles get crushed into smaller and smaller bits. In practice, the hammers are usually balls or beads that are violently agitated in milling machines. The mechanism of size reduction is simple. When a particle is subjected to adequate stress by the crushing forces of the grinding media, it develops structural defects which propagate as cracks and eventually enable the particle to break, thus reducing its size. The problem is that when a particle gets down to about 100 nanometers in size, its cross-sectional area is so small that the energy density is simply too low to impart adequate stress for further defect creation and size reduction. Consequently, in the nano range of under 100 nanometers, mechanical milling, which is time-consuming, energy-intensive, and a contaminating process, can at best deagglomerate or disperse particles, but is unable to break crystals down to below their sub-primary sizes. That was the breakthrough that we had at Landa Labs several years ago, an ultra-high energy density process for efficiently reducing practically any material to the nanoscale. Today, we are able to produce nanomaterials controllably from under 20 nanometers through the micron range for a broad range of applications. In each field of application, from cosmetics to fire retardants, from LCD television displays to solar energy, from agricultural nutrients to pharmaceutical drug delivery, we partner with world market leaders. Through these relationships, we have gained insights into the amazing potential of nanotechnology, especially nanomaterials, to enhance and enrich our lives. In this magical world of things less than 100 nanometers in size, ordinary substances like carbon, clay, and metals take on surprising properties, including greater reactivity, unusual electrical and optical properties, enormous strength, lower melting temperatures that can enable the creation of extra hard coatings, super strong materials, and even ultra powerful batteries. Nanomaterials can already be commonly found in products as varied as sunscreens, cosmetics, coatings, paints, food packaging, bacteria-killing socks, and tennis rackets. And the future is even more exciting. Nano pigments will enable nanography to transform the giant printing industry, not only to enable it to become entirely digital, but also ultra-high quality, low cost, and personalized. Nano pigments will enhance the quality of television displays, greatly increasing the contrast and depth of color. Nano-based agrochemicals will protect crops and augment food production. Graphene, a unique form of carbon that is just one atom thick, will enable supercapacitor batteries, which will take only a few minutes to charge a laptop for a full week. And nano-based solar cell energy storage will supply most consumer power needs. Thanks to nanocomposites, Self-driving electric cars will go 500 kilometers without recharging and will be lighter and stronger than today's vehicles. Tablet computers will be a thin sheet that can be rolled up and put in a pocket. The walls of our homes and offices will be covered with ultra-thin nanomaterials that will not only provide lighting, but will display information, movies, or simply background art. Nano-based filters may one day cheaply turn salt water into fresh water while removing impurities, making the world's shortage of fresh water a thing of the past. But perhaps the most exciting of all nanotechnology opportunities is in medicine, where nano drug delivery systems will revolutionize medical diagnostics and treatment. One day, using a simple blood test and inexpensive gene sequencing, patients will be checked for illnesses, including cancers. When cancer is detected, a customized dose of cancer-killing medication, uniquely formulated to target the specific cancer, will be delivered in nanoparticle form to the cancer cells without affecting healthy cells. Nano drug delivery will become a commonplace tool employed to fight pain, cure disease, and save lives. So you see, that's why I say I live a privileged and charmed life. Not only have my dreams come true, but there are always new dreams to live for. And now I'm going to tell you another secret. The most important lesson I've learned in my entire life. It has nothing to do with printing and nothing to do with nanotechnology. With all the wisdom that I have gained these past many years, the most valuable lesson of all I learned as a child from my father. And I'm now going to share that treasure with you. He said to me, "Benny, always remember this. You are unique, just like everyone else." So I say to each and every one of you, scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, businessmen, you are unique. You are the very best, and each of you lives a privileged life. But even as your career may take you to the stars, remember this: true success in life is not measured by degrees or titles, nor by fame or wealth. It is measured by whether or not your life has made a difference to society, whether you have made our planet, your country, a better place to live. Not just a technologically more advanced society, not just a more prosperous society, but also a more just and fair society, a more tolerant society, one of social justice and equal opportunity for all, one in which the privileged help the less privileged fulfill their dreams. In closing, I wish for each and every one of you that your dreams too may come true. Thank you.